and Nisa'i's Amal Yawm al-Layl, other books as well, but all of them go through the same chain of Muhammad ibn Sarjas from Al-Qasim Muhammad from Aisha. All of them go through this person whom we don't know anything about. Therefore, from a technical perspective, this hadith clearly is weak, because when you have an unknown narrator, the hadith is weak. And that's why Tirmidhi himself says, هَذَا حَدِيثٌ غَرِيبٌ. And when he says gharib, he means weak. However, I gave a lecture a few days ago in this masjid about the concept of da'if hadith, and it is permissible to use da'if hadith when it is generalities. And this is a generality. Should we make dua when we're in pain, yes or no? Yes. So there's nothing wrong with taking this hadith, even if it is slightly weak, and applying it. So we should memorize this dua, and whenever our turn comes, may Allah allow us to say it. And if we are in the presence of other people who are about to pass away, we can tell them, say this dua. What is the dua, guys? Allahumma a'inni ala sakarat al-maut. Oh Allah, help me overcome the sakarat al-maut. Help me. A'inni, right? A'inni, help me. It's gonna happen. All of us are facing sakarat. But oh Allah, with your help, it can be made easier, right? So, we ask Allah to make the sakarat easier. This is an explicit dua with a slight weakness, but no big deal, as we said. Weak du'as can be used, especially in this regard. Now, another interesting point, another interesting narration, which is in the famous book, Tabaqat ibn Sa'd. These are books, by the way, I'm introducing them to you. You should all be aware of these books as a part of our culture and heritage. One of the most classical books ever written in our tradition is called Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd. Ibn Sa'd died 240 Hijrah, very early on, before Imam al-Bukhari, by almost a generation. And Ibn Sa'd wrote Tabaqat. It is the first, Tabaqat means the levels. The Sahaba, Tabi'un, Taba Tabi'un. So it is a book of history of famous people written 200 years after the Prophet. So one of the earliest books ever written. So it's a very classical book, Tabaqat ibn Sa'd. And in this, he has the biographies of the Sahaba and Tabi'un and famous ulama of the early times. And he has, in the biography of Amr ibn al-As, a very interesting narration that is relevant to our talk. Amr ibn al-As, who is Amr ibn al-As? Does everybody know Amr ibn al-As? Amr ibn al-As is the father of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. And who is Amr ibn al-As? First governor of Egypt, okay? The conqueror of Egypt. Our Egyptian brother knows who Amr is. Half of Egypt is called Amr, mashallah, tabarakallah, because of Amr ibn al-As. And the most famous masjid is the masjid of Amr ibn al-As. So Amr ibn al-As was the one who led the campaign in Egypt. And he was, of course, eventually the right hand of Muawiyah as well, radiyallahu anhu. Now, Amr ibn al-As, very famous Sahabi, the last of the Sahaba to get the honor of Hijrah. Right? He was the last three who entered, was Amr ibn al-As was amongst them. Now, Amr ibn al-As has a very interesting career because he is one of the politicians of the Sahaba, and I mean that in a positive manner. And this is something that even Umar ibn Khattab and others remarked, that this is a man who was born for politics, siyasa. He knows, and by politics means he knows how to control and govern. And Muawiyah radiallahu anh used him fully to be his potential. Amr ibn al-As was about to pass away. He's on his deathbed. And his son, who is his son? Abdullah. And the two of them are as different as the night from the day. Abdullah, and if you know who he is, and Amr, and if you know who he is. And I mean this in a positive manner. I have to always be careful because some people just waiting for that 10-second clip and read something in, as you know. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu was a zahid, abid, yani just ascetic, cut off from the world. He just wants to worship. Has nothing to do with siyasa, money, nothing. And Amr ibn al-As was very involved in the affairs of this dunya. Let's just put it that way, in a very positive manner. Jayyid. The two are very different. Abdullah visits Amr on his deathbed. Listen to this. Abdullah says, Ya abati, my dear father, don't you remember? You used to say to me, Ajaban liman nazara bihil maut. I always wonder at the one who's about to die, and he's still conscious, why doesn't he describe it to those around him? So, dear father, can you describe death to us? You guys follow what's happening? Abdullah says to his father, Oh father, I remember you telling me once upon a time, you used to say this to us, that why don't the people who are about to die tell us what they're feeling? If they're able to, if they have aql. And my dear father, you have right now consciousness, and it's at that time, so why don't you tell us? Isn't this an interesting narration? Right? So Amr ibn al-As responds, and he says, Ya bunay, al-mawtu ajallu min an yusaf. My dear son, death is too big of a deal to be able to describe to you now. I can't describe it. So he is now sakaratul maut. He is in the last phases of this dunya, and he knows it, and he's conscious. And his son is saying, tell me. And the father says, it's ajal. And ajal means it's much larger, much more bigger than what I can describe to you. Walakin, but let me describe a little bit of how I'm feeling. I find myself as if my chest is under the mountain of Radwa. The mountain of Radwa is a large range of mountains between Medina and Yambu'. It's one of the largest range of mountains, bigger than Uhud. So he says, I feel that my chest, the mountain of Radwa is on top of it. And I feel that in my throats there are shawk, there are pins pushing outside. So from external there's pressure, from internal there's pressure, and I feel that my soul is being told to go through the eye of a needle. This is how all of it is coming together. Externally, I feel the pressure. Internally, I feel a sense, and the sense I have, the impossibility of the task ahead of me, my soul has to go through the eye of the needle. So this is one of the last things that Amr ibn al-As said before he passed away, describing how he feels during this time. Now, the question arises, do all souls feel the sakaratul maut, or are there some exceptions? The response, Allah only knows, but it does appear that the default amongst mankind is that there shall be sakarat. And we know this from a number of things. First and foremost, the generality of the Quran and the Sunnah. The ghamaratul maut, the sakaratul maut that occurs, these phrases occur, they're always linked together. Sakaratul maut occurs together. So it is as if maut always has sakara. And our Prophet ﷺ said, Ala inna lil mauti sakarat. Verily, along with maut, there are sakarat. So the generality of the Quran and Sunnah indicates that everybody, Muslim and kafir, righteous and unrighteous, the muttaqi and the fajir, all of them have sakarat. This is the first evidence. The second evidence, very few exceptions explicitly exist that this person does not have sakara. The fact that the Prophet ﷺ would say this person does not have sakara indicates the rest will. So from this we can derive that even if we do not see the sakarat, for example, a person passes away in sleep and we did not see the sakarat, or a person passes away instantaneously. An accident happens, and whatever, from our perspective, millisecond. From our perspective, the ship drowned and the person, whatever, falling off, or an accident. So from the human perspective, we think 1 millisecond. But we will say, in the alamul barzakh, the pangs are going to occur in their time frame, not in our time frame. Regardless of whether we can sense it or not, the default appears to be every soul will have sakarat. And as already explained, the time frame of the soul is not our clock time frame. This is a different time frame, and they will have to bear their sakarat. Imam al-Qurtubi says, in his famous book on the Barzakh and the Ahwal al-Maut and the Akhir, he has a 3-volume book. And some of this material is also from there. And as you know, if you're not aware, I always take my sources from the original. I go back to the original sources. I don't only have just one book. There's always whatever I give a talk on. Inshallah, you will always hear various sources. Imam al-Qurtubi said that if the Anbiya and the Salihun undergo sakarat, then how can anybody assume we will be safe from it? If the Anbiya and the righteous will be undergoing sakarat, no one should live under the false assumption that they will not be undergoing the sakarat. Then Qurtubi says, now if somebody were to say, what is the wisdom behind the sakarat for the righteous? What is the wisdom behind the sakarat for the Prophet ﷺ and the righteous? Qurtubi says, we respond with two things. Number one, so that the rest of the creation can see the reality of death, even through those whom Allah loves. And this is a very terrifying phrase. Even those whom Allah loves, Allah wants to show us death is not easy. There will be sakarat. And so no one should assume, Qurtubi says, that if somebody dies quietly, that death is easy. This is basically what I'm saying. What I said before I quoted Qurtubi, I said the same thing. And that is that just because we think the guy died quietly, we shouldn't assume that it was an easy death in the alamul barzakh. Death is always an awkward process, even for the righteous. There are sakarat, even for the righteous. The second reason, he said, is that we have to understand these pains in light of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that those who are tested the most in this world are the prophets and then closest to them. Meaning, this is an authentic hadith we all know, meaning any pain or suffering or irritation or nuisance for the righteous is only meant to increase his maqam in the eyes of Allah before the akhirah comes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to max out our hasanat. He wants to give us the highest place. And He does so with, as the Prophet said, even a pin that will afflict you. Allah will raise your ranks one darajah. So if Allah wants to raise somebody higher and higher and higher, there will be nuisances. There will be pain. There will be suffering. And the goal will be to raise that person up higher and higher. So this is something that is very clear, that even the righteous are going to face sakarat. Now, does every single person face the sakarat? It appears that perhaps the shaheed does not face the sakarat. Nothing explicit, but we can derive it. The hadith mentions, hadith is in Tirmidhi, the shaheed only feels his death to the same extent as one of you feels the bite of an ant. Which means the shaheed does not feel sakarat. So it does seem that perhaps there are some exceptions to the sakarat, and if there is, then it is going to be the shaheed is explicitly mentioned. So this is the issue of the sakaratul maut. The hadith of Bara already mentions the ruh going up and coming back down, and then we mentioned that the ruh goes back to the place where the body is. Then we get to the next issue, which is the issue of the fitna of the qabr. And I'll start today, and then I'll continue the fitna next, because there's more to be said than in just one day. I'll just mention a few points about the fitna of the qabr, and then we'll continue this next week, inshaAllah ta'ala. We have to differentiate. A lot of Muslims get confused between fitnatul qabr and adhabul qabr, and they consider them to be the same thing. And this is a big mistake, because the two are totally separate, completely separate. The fitna is something that everybody is going to undergo, the Muslim and the kafir, except for a small group of exceptions as we're going to talk about. The adhab is something that the righteous will not have. They will have the na'imul qabr. The fitna is the precursor to the na'im or the adhab. The fitna is the first step when the ruh comes back in. That is the fitna. And after the fitna will either be the blessing or the punishment, the na'im or the adhab. So na'imul qabr versus adhabul qabr. This is after. Before that is the fitna. We can say the fitna is the examination. That's what fitna means. The fitna is the examination. And the default, everybody will undergo that examination. In the hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, this hadith is muttafaq alayh. Anas ibn Malik said that the Prophet ﷺ told us, when the servant is put in his qabr, so once again the ruh is going back to the qabr. The fitna takes place in the qabr. Where the qabr is, physically, that is where the fitna is. Now, As we said, the scholars all mention, in case there is no physical qabr that you know of, there is a qabr somewhere in the world that Allah is aware of. So even if there is no body, if the body incinerates, if the body something happens, somewhere there is going to be some relationship of the ashes or the drowned body or the corpse or something. And wherever that is, the ruh will be over there. Okay? So the ruh will be attached to the remnants of the body when the fitna takes place. The fitna will take place in this world at the qabr. The hadith is explicit. When the servant is put in his qabr, and his family and friends turn away and leave, and indeed he shall hear their footsteps as they walk away, 2 angels will come to him and sit him up. And they will ask him, and now you know the 3 questions, we went over it last time. The hadith of Bara also mentions it. What do you say about, this man? It says, so you know all of these things. As for the believer, he will say, I testify he is Abdullah wa Rasuluh. And as for the munafiq, then he will say, la adri, and he will be hit with something that everyone will hear other than the makhluqat. Okay, this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, narrated by Anas. Does it mention the names of the angels? No. It says 2 angels. Yet the names of the angels we all know. Where do we get them from? It is not in Bukhari and Muslim. It is in Sunan at-Tirmidhi, and the chain is of contested quality. So some of our more strict muhaddithin say that the hadith is not authentic, and the majority of scholars, including Imam at-Tirmidhi, say the hadith is authentic, and inshallah, in my humble opinion, it is authentic. And this is now different from the issue of the dua, because when it comes to theology, we need a sahih hadith. We cannot derive theology from a weak hadith. Okay? So if the hadith that mentions the names of the angels were weak, we should clarify that the names of the angels are not known to us. But if the hadith is authentic, and inshallah it is authentic, then we can say, yes, the names of the angels are known to us. And the names of the angels occur in a hadith in Tirmidhi, reported by Abu Hurairah, not the hadith of Anas ibn Malik. And Abu Hurairah says that I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, when the mayyit is put in the qabr, so once again it is in the qabr, 2 angels come who are bluish and darkish. Bluish and darkish. That's atypical. It's a terrifying sight. Bluish and darkish. One of them is called, what is he called? Munkar. And the other is called Nakir. Aha. Where do we get the names from? Hadith is in Tirmidhi, narrated from Abu Hurairah. يُقَالُ لِأَحَدِهِمَا الْمُنْكَرُ وَلِلْآخَرِ النَّكِيرُ. And they will say, and then the questions come, and then the righteous will say, oh Allah, cause the day of judgment to come quickly because he sees his place, the Jannah. And the unrighteous will say, oh Allah, delay the judgment day. So the issue of Munkar and Nakir is something that is explicit in the hadith of Tirmidhi. Now, so what is the fitnatul qabr? The fitnatul qabr is the 3 questions. The fitnatul qabr is Munkar and Nakir coming and questioning you. That is the fitna. And the righteous will pass the fitna, but they still undergo the fitna. Correct? You see the point, right? So don't get confused between fitnatul qabr and between adhabul qabr. Adhabul qabr is the punishment that will happen to the unrighteous afterwards. And the fitna is the examination before that. Now, will everybody undergo the fitna? No. Allah will save categories of people. Let's quickly mention these categories and then we'll ask Q&A and then we're done for today. Number one. Who do you think will be number 1 explicitly mentioned in the hadith? Shaheed. This is explicitly mentioned in the hadith. A person asked the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, why is it that the shaheed does not have to have the fitnatul qabr? This is an explicit question. Ya Rasulullah, why is it that the shaheed doesn't have fitnatul qabr? This means that the notion of the shaheed being saved from fitnatul qabr was known to all of the Sahaba. That's why you have a Sahabi coming up saying, Ya Rasulullah, how come the shaheed doesn't have the fitnatul qabr? You see the question? They already know it. Now he wants to know why. So the Prophet ﷺ said, كَفَى بِبَارِقَةِ السُّيُوفِ عَلَى رَأْسِهِ فِتْنَةً رَوَاهُ النِّسَائِ. It is enough, the shining blade of light striking his neck, that is enough of a fitna that he doesn't have to pass the munkar and nakir. The fact that the shaheed did what he did, it is enough of a fitna. He has passed the test. There is no need to pass the test. And there are a number of, like if you're in some classes, the professor knows you so well. He'll say, look, you're such a student, you don't even need to take the exam. You don't even take the exam. I just know it. You know more than anyone else by a stretch, whatnot. This is essentially the same thing. The Prophet ﷺ is saying, it is enough of a fitna for the shaheed that the sharpness and the whiteness of the sword strikes his neck. Why does he have to undergo munkar and nakir? He's already tested and proved himself there. This hadith is in Sunan an-Nisa'i.